The feature is not going to go anywhere. You know, you don't ever have to hit something. Like, you might build it up in your head and you're like, today is the day, but like, you really need to be able to listen to yourself.
Welcome to Grit with Wisdom. This is the podcast that delves deep into the inner psyche of mountain bikers from all aspects of our sport in order to discover the tools and the tactics that can help us have more fun out on the trails more often. Our aim here is to help you understand what it takes to push our own personal boundaries in the sport we love from a mental and emotional perspective. Today on the podcast, I'm sitting down here post-ride with Nate Spitz. Nate is hands down one of the most creative and talented mountain bikers that I've had the pleasure of hanging out with. He's originally from New Hampshire on the east coast of the USA. Nate grew up riding bikes and building sketchy jumps, dreaming of being able to do this for the rest of his life. He now lives and breathes that dream, mountain biking, almost every day here in Squamish. He achieves this by sharing his skills and passion through working as a coach with Yoann Barelli's Into the Gnar, and also through a multitude of other freeride, filming, and building projects. Nate, with no further ado, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks a lot, Jake. Yeah, that's a very nice intro. I appreciate it. And I don't really have a ton to add. Yeah, I guess I moved to Squamish to go to university, but I also knew where I was moving, and you know, I didn't want to go anywhere else. So.
Beauty, man. That was one thing we didn't quite get into talking about on our ride. What did you study here at Quest?
I studied geology and generally earth sciences, but Quest you really had the freedom to kind of study whatever you wanted and choose your own path. So I found I really liked the earth science courses because I like being outside, and they're always cool field trips.
Yeah, dude, that's so cool to hear that background. And I mean, today you're not necessarily doing geology, but you're still out there spending lots of time in the dirt, building trails, riding trails.
Totally.
Working with all kinds of different materials.
Yeah, and talking to clients too. And it's like cool to talk to people who aren't from around here about that stuff.
Yeah,
Because like, I don't know, like Squamish it's pretty unique with its geology and formation history. And I don't know, I think people are just like, oh, it's beautiful, and don't really know why.
Yeah,
so cool.
Yeah. Super cool that you have that background. I'd love to learn more about that maybe some other time. So
yeah,
it's super rad, man. You just took me on a fantastic little backyard lap here in Squamish, kind of some steep and deep, and then some chill trails as well.
Totally, really, so good.
And speaking of dirt, the dirt was fantastic. Like I said to you, you didn't kill me, so thank you for that. It was fantastic to kind of, see, we've ridden together twice now, but get a peek into like, you know, how you operate out on the bike. And like I said to you, I love following you into stuff. You've kind of got this kind of calm approach at sending some pretty sketchy stuff, which, you know, bleeds down into some confidence for me to maybe hit some things I wouldn't usually hit.
That's sweet.
So I'd love to dive into your background on bikes a little bit here and maybe start to understand how you got to where you are now.
Okay.
Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about like where you grew up and when bikes first came into your life.
Sweet, yeah. So I grew up in Lyme, New Hampshire, which is a small town near Hanover, which is also a small town, but it's where Dartmouth College is. And I grew up ski racing. So for about 5 or 6, I knew I liked going fast and like flying through the air. That was like what I wanted to do. So, so in the summer, basically, you know, there was all this time not doing that. And none of the, like, you know, we played soccer, we played baseball, whatever, just like goofed around. And, but biking was like that one sport that kind of translated to the skiing field. And my friends and I would just build jumps, or we had like some plastic jumps. But yeah, we would just hit these plastic jumps in the driveway and then build some dirt jumps in the backyard and just like all day just be hitting the jumps. And then, you know, kind of the natural progression. You just keep building bigger. And then when I turned 11 or 12, I got a dump truck load of dirt for my birthday. And like I built one massive jump out of it, just like one big step up that eventually became just a huge gap jump. And I just practiced hitting it every day. And if I didn't hit it, I'd have to like rebuild the whole lip because it was way too steep and sketchy to like hit if you hadn't hit it the day before.
So that process of building and learning about jumps, shaping, all that stuff started pretty young.
Yeah, I did a ton of that when I was a kid, and we built trails, we built jumps, like classic kid stuff. Some of it works, most of it doesn't, but
Yeah,
you definitely get an eye for sort of doing it, and watching all the bike movies from, this area and surrounding trails in BC. It's just, I knew I wanted to come here.
Right, so that
Forever.
seed was planted pretty early on.
Totally.
Yeah. And the terrain, I guess if you got a dump truck load of dirt for your birthday, the terrain was pretty flat, like in your backyard to start with?
Totally. We had like some sort of small hills, not far at all, like pedaling out the door.
Right.
But there was no like real bike trails, some hiking trails, like an old, double wide snowmobile trail.
Yeah.
But yeah, we kind of had to build our own stuff. We'd go ride the like steep dirt piles over at the dump next door, and
Fantastic.
yeah, it was cool. But yeah, my yard very flat. Like I had to pedal into the jumps.
Yeah, I find that really interesting because I think I can really see it in your style of mountain biking today. You've got this crazy bag of like flatland tricks and style.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, do
Parking lot tricks.
you think that came from just messing about as a kid in like mainly flat environment? You mentioned you had some steps outside your local library that was kind of like the only drops in town.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, there wasn't much for like drops or, like my yard had jumps. My dad and I built some like sketchy drops off of the like one little bank in the back that had some vertical relief. But like, always pretty much like just like jumping off something to pretty much a flat landing with like a little bit of dirt. So yeah, lots of just time pedaling around with my friends and stuff, and yeah, jumping off whatever we could. So I think just time spent on the bike kind of leads to like those sort of playful like wheelies and goofing around, and maybe more so with, sort of less terrain to go ride.
Totally. It's just like minimum terrain, maximum skill.
Yeah, still the same amount of time on the bike, just goofy and playing around in different ways.
Man, I love it. It's so cool to see like what that's resulted in today. The style of riding you've got. Yeah. You're obviously like so passionate and motivated to go and ride. Like you say, like every day, just time on the bike. What is it, or what do you think it is about mountain biking and about bikes in general that makes you so passionate and motivated?
Well, I definitely need to move. Like, I'm pretty fidgety.
Okay.
Or like ADHD, I just like have to be moving to keep my brain and body happy. And so biking is like a really, I don't know, at some point I've decided that like that's what I wanted to focus on and like spend time doing. And even though it's not easy to go ride every opportunity, it's like it might be pouring rain or
Totally.
you might be tired or whatever. It's like every time you're out there, you're never like, oh, I wish I wasn't here. You're always like, oh, this is awesome. Like, so I think it's just kind of wanting to like live a positive life every day. It's just get on your bike. It makes it easy.
Yeah, totally, man. Yeah, getting on it is sometimes the hardest part, right?
Exactly,
But,
yeah.
Well, I can't remember many rides I've regretted.
Yeah,
back to the
totally.
house. Yeah. Man, so fast forward to today, you kind of living the bike dream here in Squamish. You're coaching, you're riding, you're building, part of a whole bunch of filming projects. Wanted to dive straight in here and talk about one of your most recent builds. It's kind of been blowing up online, the Elevator Trail.
Elevator.
Yeah. I wanted to know, obviously a lot of people have seen the video. If they haven't already, go and watch it. I'll link it in the show notes. But I wanted to hear like the process from first like being out wherever that was in the forest and spotting this crazy looking cliff, this piece of terrain. Walk us through the process from like first seeing that terrain to actually build in it and then eventually getting to ride it.
Okay, yeah, so for that one, I think pretty much every time I was there, I was with like a group of friends. So the first time, I mean, like I'd seen that piece of terrain for a while. Like I knew there was a huge slab off the top there, and I knew it cliffed out everywhere. And at first, I never really thought about it. I was like, oh, it cliffs out. But then, you're kind of like, oh, well, it cliffs out. Like that's maybe more exciting. And then I think, it just sort of sat on hold. And then I was there one day, maybe 2 years ago, with a bunch of friends. And we actually kind of started clearing the landing a little bit, and like we looked at it seriously. And there was a big group of us, so we were kind of moving logs around pretty easily. And it's kind of too steep to really walk up, but I got onto the bottom of it, and initially I'd planned to go on the other side of, there's a little tree, or a pretty big tree there.
Okay.
And I'd planned to go on the other side of it, but that was like a smaller drop to a landing with a corner, and it would have been more building.
Yeah.
And then, we didn't really do anything. We just kind of made it possible to build, sort of got an idea of what the ground was like.
Okay.
And then just like thinking about it, it's just like, well, why would you go smaller when there's like this big awesome drop option right there that's like works better with the terrain anyways. So.
Okay, so like straighter but bigger.
Yeah, just going straight off the nose, going a bit bigger. Because once we'd cleared some of the logs, it was like, oh, it actually is going to go fine. Like, It's not that much work.
Yeah.
And then I came back a few times on my own and like did some more figuring and whatever. And then, I came back with friends and made it happen.
Yeah.
And then I consulted with the builder who does a lot of the work locally there to make sure that we weren't going to mess up any of his stuff because it is pretty close.
Yeah. So I'm curious, like for those that haven't seen it, this thing is steep. It's a super steep slab.
It's like 45, 50 degrees. It's like convex and then gets probably 50, 55 maybe.
Yeah, and then there's a drop that's, how high would you say?
Drops maybe 15, 20 feet.
15, 20 feet, yeah.
Yeah, probably 20-foot distance, but maybe not quite that tall.
It's a big drop for sure. And I'm curious, like you're able to look at it from the bottom, build the landing, that kind of thing. You maybe had to look from the top.
Yeah.
It's not really the kind of line you can walk down and imagine yourself riding, is it? Because it's so steep.
No, I had to tie a rope to the tree at the top so that I could like comfortably go up.
Then you just hang it down, or you belaying like rock climbing stuff?
No, it's just holding on.
Hanging
like
down,
it's almost walkable, but
Okay.
if you fell, you wouldn't want to fall.
Get
so
some
it's
road
nice
rash.
to have the rope to
Totally.
to like keep you a little more
Right,
confident.
so you're edging yourself down on the rope, kind of imagining what it's going to be like to ride.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I just cleared the strip of moss.
So I know if I was like holding on a rope and edging down this slab and thinking about riding this drop, was there ever any doubt in your mind as you're going down there and like, will this work?
I mean, I knew it would work. Like, people have hit much bigger drops, and that steepness of slab is it's a little steeper than In-N-Out Burger, but there's plenty of local slabs that you can really get a feel for it on.
So you're kind of comparing it to other similar things you've rode and then
Yeah.
putting all those pieces together to like, I think I could ride this new feature.
It's kind of like the last slab of K-line.
Okay, yeah.
Steep, long, and then gets a bit steeper in that case. This one has a drop.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then you just then I'd go practice. I'd ride other slabs and think about like what it would be like. And then just spending enough time there. I just knew, I knew it would go. The scary part was knowing that I had to be the first one to ride it.
Totally.
I mean, I didn't have to be, of course, but there's like a bit of the I didn't build the whole thing myself, but I've facilitated the building of it mostly. And then, someone's got to hit it first.
Yeah, do you feel a bit of pressure kind of being the one that came up with the concept?
Healthy pressure, not like, oh God,
Yeah, totally.
I have to do it, but more like, okay, it's done. Like,
Yeah. No,
I'm ready.
That's fantastic, man. Like, congrats
Yeah.
on opening up that feature and hitting it. It's such a rad one.
Thank you. It's cool.
Yeah, like I said, I'll put a link down there in the show notes so people can go and watch that one.
Beauty.
I'm curious, kind of like on that subject of like opening up all new lines and kind of you continuing to push the bar higher and higher. Wanted to talk about this idea of like risk creep. Obviously, you're taking some insane risks out there. You're getting some insane rewards, riding at an awesome level. But I'm curious, like on that topic, like how do you know when to say no?
You have to pay attention to your gut feeling. Like for me, I'm going to take the risk at some point, or like take the risk. I'm going to ride the feature, but I think the risk profile changes a lot depending on how you approach something. So like, you might show up one day unsure of whether you're going to ride it and kind of just go by the feel of that's how I'm feeling right now about tonight. It's like I'm supposed to go ride some stuff that's like already scary enough to go ride, and then supposed to go do it in the dark, or like we're going to go to those places, and like once you're there, then you have to like make a bit more of a real assessment. Generally it's based on sort of like, I don't know, I always like to ride a little bit before I just go hit stuff. That way I kind of feel how I am like on and with the bike. And then, yeah, it can be pretty nerve-wracking for sure, but.
Totally, so doing a bit of an assessment, it sounds like almost starting by thinking about what the plan is before you're out on the bike.
Yeah, totally.
And then checking in that day.
The feature is not going to go anywhere. You don't ever have to hit something. Like you might build it up in your head and you're like, today's the day. But like, you really need to be able to listen to yourself and say, actually, my bike's not working great, or the conditions don't align, or I'm just like not feeling it for some weird reason. Like, you need to listen to that, and because you will feel it, and the more you go to those places and think about those features and visualize doing it, the more you kind of are familiarizing yourself, and that plays a big role in being comfortable.
Totally, like taking away as many of the unknowns as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you can also train a little bit, like making sure that your like body's in good condition, that you're not like nursing a broken foot while trying to like ride. Like, I was dealing with that this summer. It was like horrible.
Totally.
Trying to like ride the Tour de Gnar and also having an injury like that I wanted to ignore because I didn't want to acknowledge that, like,
right.
I don't know. So being smarter than that, but sometimes the timing doesn't line up. So you just have to
I guess you learn through these experiences.
Yeah.
Dude, I had no idea that you were riding all that stuff with an injury.
Yeah. It wasn't, I never even went to the hospital because I had like an embarrassing crash, and I just like didn't want to acknowledge that,
Right.
that like it had happened. So whatever.
Yeah, but you're all good now?
Yeah,
You
yeah,
feel
all
now?
good. I just like, I don't know. I think I had like something very bruised or broken in my foot, in my
Okay.
heel, and then that doesn't like inspire confidence. If you had to like bail midline, or like a lot of these features, you want to know if something is going to go wrong, like what is it going to be and how will you react, like, because you don't plan for that stuff. But if you don't know it, you're just like coming in blind. You need to know where, like, what happens if you fall.
Totally.
So,
it's definitely
like,
worth having as much information as you can have before you actually get to that point of
you might be able to do something like move a log or like kick over a little stump or something that like could make it really bad if you fell somewhere too. So a bit of like risk mitigation just by like going through the area. I'm not gonna
Definitely.
put pads down probably. Like, it's too much effort to carry that stuff in.
Totally, yeah.
Make sure
do
you're
it
not
as
falling
much as
into
you
like
can.
a spiky snake pit.
Yeah.
That's kind of good.
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth a look. I talk about this with clients, a lot of clients that are like, oh, let's just ride in. I'll ride it better if I don't look at it first and kind of like wig myself out.
Yeah.
But I think it definitely comes to a point, like when we get to a certain point in our riding and the consequence of the moves or the features we're riding goes up to a certain level, that it's like, we've got to do our due diligence. We've got to take a look before we ride some of those things.
100%. And there is the like being in the flow component, but like, I think if you want to be a feature rider and like drop into those bigger, more high consequence moves, you need to be able to get in the flow quickly and like, or maybe set yourself up smart in a different way where you're warmed up, you have like an in-run that you can use to kind of be on your bike, but 100% you need to look at like what you're about to do. Otherwise you're just like putting bullets in the chamber and spinning the thing and hoping it's not that time, like.
Totally, like no one wants to play roulette on their bike.
No.
Yeah.
Not at all. Or like, it sort of works until it doesn't. But at a certain point, like the features are too high consequence to approach in that way, for sure.
Totally, yeah. And you talk about like this idea of like being in the flow. I know we've all kind of got our own description of like what that is.
Yeah.
What does that mean for you?
Well, it's hard, right? It's kind of one of those elusive topics. For me, though, like, I try to be pretty realistic because, my goals are to like ride a lot of features and do a lot of things. So, I'm still talking myself into doing these things. Like, I'm not just showing up being like, oh, maybe today, maybe not. And then getting in the flow, it's like, you have to kind of fight for it a little bit. Like, it doesn't always come easy to like, sometimes you just have to say, there's no reason I'm not feeling it. Like, I'm here, I want this, I need to like lock it in. And often it's just, I think, a matter of focus and preparation, making sure that like you're in the right gear, I think like not breaking flow is a good way to like be in the flow. So if you just kind of avoid, when you go to drop in and you're like, oh, this is wrong, oh, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, like you're definitely not in the flow if you're like making corrections that are just like being on your bike. Whereas if you prepare yourself well, you can kind of optimize your, it only takes a second. Like, it's a moment of just like, all right, here we go. And then I guess you're in it, right?
Yeah, I really like that insight. And I kind of seen that riding with you today. You've got a bike that you've just built up and you're like, oh, it's not quite set right. You were changing a few things before we dropped in.
Right.
But then once we dropped in, you're like, I'm riding now. I'll worry about that at the bottom.
Yeah, totally.
And it
One
was
thing
really
at a
cool to
time.
see. And I guess that preparation as well, like today's ride for you was pretty chill. Just out riding, some backyard trails with me, but you've got like a gnarly night ride happening tonight with Remy.
Well, today was
And
like a perfect.
It was,
Yeah. Like you say, I wouldn't really be getting into flow easily on a bike that's not quite set up right. You're kind of like making those adjustments. So it's really important to, before you do your gnarly move or whatever, to like have taken the right steps ahead of time.
Yeah, like you
So
did that
this was
pre-ride
perfect.
with me. You went and put some more air in your fork. You adjusted a few things.
Yeah. It took some
Yeah.
air out actually.
Yeah, now you're set for maybe getting into that flow state tonight.
Hopefully.
Fantastic. So
Yeah.
let's tell the listeners about tonight. What are you getting up to?
I'm going to go ride with Remy Mataye. We're going to go do some night riding. He's got these awesome lights that we went and tested them out last week. You probably saw his video. He posted the clip of the Garanga.
I didn't actually. I'm going to have to go back and watch that one.
It was crazy, man. He rode it 4 times. Like, Remy likes to do stuff till he's kind of like, till he's happy with it. And like between the filming it and getting the riding perfect, it often takes like at least 5 tries. So it's amazing. He'll just like it was raining and dark, and he hit like we warmed up on sauerkraut.
Perspective, this is your first ever night ride, is that right?
That's right, yeah. Well, like, I think I've been out with a headlamp before, but I've never like been for a night ride.
Okay.
With a bike light.
Proper
and
setup.
Yeah.
Dude, that's crazy.
Yeah, it was cool. It's funny. It's just like boom, right in the deep end. There you
And
go.
like, how did you find it? I asked you a few questions kind of off recorded there. Like,
I honestly was riding super poorly. Like I was sick. It was kind of like I didn't really set myself up very well. Like my bike needed a service, and I like had some worn out bushings, and I just like couldn't even. My tires were really low tread. I couldn't grip at all. I was like flying off the trail. I was like totally not there mentally, and so I opted out of all those tricky moves. But
well, that's good to hear, right? You kind of learn from it, and you're back tonight with perhaps a little bit more preparation.
Yeah, a little bit more. Still nervous. Like I just like don't know what I'm gonna do.
And for you, like, how do you describe like good nerves versus bad nerves?
Oh, that's a good question. I think if you've done all your preparation and like, have set yourself up to be successful, nervousness is just like kind of your body's being highly attuned and like can be translated to focus and skill. But I think nervousness, if you're like really uncertain or if you're like not prepared, would be like bad nervousness.
Yeah, perhaps like a warning sign that like, hey, are you sure? Yeah,
exactly. There's like butterflies and then there's like apprehension, and like
That's a good way to put
sometimes
it.
it's hard to know what the line is, right, between the two.
Totally. So do you find like self-talk comes into it for you? It sounds like you're like telling yourself, hey, I've done the work, I've set up my bike, I'm prepared.
Yes.
Or perhaps the opposite sometimes, like, I'm not really feeling this today, my bike's not quite ready.
It's hard to say no. It's hard to like be there and be like, actually, I'm not feeling it right now.
Totally.
So like removing your ego from, like Yoann and I are actually working on something right now, like a risk evaluation tool.
Yeah, I'm super
we're
excited to
gonna
see
make
that
an
one. I
app,
was chatting with him about the idea as well.
But basically like running through a checklist, like, is my equipment good? Are the conditions good? Am I prepared for this? Can I visualize this? Like basically just having a bunch of things that tally up to a score, and then you can just say, oh, like, it's really easy to come back to a feature tomorrow or later that day even, or like a week later, or if you don't live there, you come back the next time you're there. Like, whereas it's a lot harder to come back to a feature after having a big injury from like there's like a lot of mental components to work through when you like have an injury or something like that. So I think that it's always better to make the right call. Like,
yeah, it's a really sound way of putting it. Like, perhaps sometimes it does feel really disheartening when perhaps, you're visiting somewhere and you've really been wanting to hit this trail, this feature, or
you're doing a video with Remy and like you want to break the internet.
Time involved.
Totally.
Yeah, to be like, hey, I'm going to put the ego aside and break the internet another day.
Yeah, or just like not break myself today, right?
Yeah,
pretty funny, but
it's wise words there, man. I love getting that
easier said than done.
Totally.
Who
And
knows?
I finally got around to watching the full Into the Gnar video last night.
Oh,
doing
sweet.
preparation for this podcast. And man, it was fantastic. Like, credit to you, to Yoann, to all the other riders involved. Such a journey. And it was so cool seeing lots of people in this situation making lots of those yes or no kind of like high consequence decisions.
Totally, especially in the group setting. Like, I was pretty impressed. Like, with a lot of my friends, with some people I didn't know. There were a few scary moments, but generally I was like, man, everyone made good decisions, and like, you know, a few injuries, like that's, I don't want to say it's expected. It's the worst thing, like the last thing you want, but you're in the danger zone all day. There's a ton of riders, you know, like 30 riders times 15 moves. That's like, what, 450, like jumps and landings?
Yeah, like opportunities for something to potentially go wrong.
Yeah. Or like 450 awesome moments to go right. But
Exactly.
like
that was what,
know,
like
statistically, it's just like
448 things that went well that day.
pretty much. Yeah.
To
A couple other
identify.
crashes too, but like that's just mountain biking, right?
Totally. I wanted to ask you, like, speaking about like having there's 30 odd riders on each feature, plus a bunch of people spectating on some of them, photographers there as well. Like, how do you go about changing your mindset on a day like that when you're performing in front of an audience versus just out riding with you and one other buddy?
There's a lot of build up to that day. So like I don't know, I almost felt like my body was like really well, just like already,
Right.
you know, I was like, I'm ready to go. Like I was like shaking, but in like a very like so focused, so tuned in. Like as soon as we rode a few things on in and out, I was like, oh yeah, I feel good today. Like I feel strong. And I think starting the day on a good note is a good way to sort of carry the wave through the rest of the day, because it's a lot. Like you say, there's people there, there's like this order, there's kind of a bit of like a ton of camaraderie, but a little bit of like, all right, I want to make sure that, you know, you don't just like ride the feature minimally. Like you want to bring a little flair or some flavor. And
Totally. I could sense that, like everyone almost trying to do it slightly differently and put their own flavor on it.
yeah,
Totally. And that was what made the film so interesting to watch.
Totally. Like all those features are like standout features, but when you have 30 people hitting them, you know, it's just like another hit, another hit, another hit. Like how do you stand out, right? How do you make that interesting?
Totally. And it sounds like you were kind of, like your preparation started before the day, before like the warm-up lap. You were visualizing what was going to go down. And
yeah, I mean, I was like hanging out at the Rutherford. Like Yoann and I bought $1,000 worth of lumber to build the landing for the double drop, because we couldn't source it in time for like, so I just like called Pemberton Valley Building Supply or whatever, and they delivered a truck, and then we unloaded it, and some random lads who were just driving by stopped to pull in to check out the train gap or something, and ended up helping me carry like, you know, the whole like, I don't even remember how many boards we bought, like 90 boards or whatever, like over to it was hilarious.
Good on you guys.
So thanks guys.
Yeah, like putting your own money and your own blood, sweat and tears into making the dream happen.
Yeah, but it's like, we'd been preparing for a long time, you know, just building features and like making sure things were, you know, like more safe as they could have been with no budget and
Totally
limited time frame.
Yeah. And this is something I wanted to ask you on the building before. Do you find like your time just there at the feature, being part of the build? I know you're obviously like sussing out the angle and working it all out in your head before building it, during building it. Do you find that helps when it comes to actually getting on the bike and riding it for the first time?
So much. Like approaching a new feature, like, you know, you've never been there, you never like seen a feature quite like that, whereas once you've built something, you may have never hit it, but you visualize it so much.
And does that experience then translate when perhaps, you know, you set up to go ride a feature that someone else has built? Are you looking at it through your builder's lens and like, is this going to work? Are the angles right?
I mean, I always try and sort of imagine, like, I always try to spend a bit of time at a feature that someone else has like clearly put a bunch of time into, because like they had a vision for it, you know, and so understanding their vision, I think, helps feel more comfortable. like on especially something like bigger or scarier, you know, like
Yeah.
like Hans is a good example. He's built so many crazy gnarly features in town, and a lot of
Yeah.
them you can't even like stand on it because it's like a convex rock that's like way steeper than the
That's
little
what
thing
blows
I
my
built,
mind.
you know?
Like I like to walk through a line and visualize myself riding
Yeah.
it. So like to you, when there's a rope hanging down off the rock and you can't walk, and I'm like,
Yeah.
how does that look?
Yeah, it's a bit more of a mental game.
Dude, that's fantastic insight to hear that. And I think going back into the Gnar, like one of my favorite parts and talk about standout moments is like lunchtime. You're there in the parking lot, everyone else is eating burgers and whatever, and you're like, hey, look at my thick jibs. You're there like having fun in the parking lot, showing off some skills. Like
I do love the parking lot tricks. Yeah.
it's so rad to see. And like I wanted to ask, like, how important do you think those skills are for people starting out learning, or perhaps have been riding for a while like I have, but still getting some coaching and working on their riding? Like, how important do you think it is to go back to the parking lot and put the hours into those skills?
Well, I think that often people are like dissuaded from parking lot tricks because, you know, they get called like a show off, or they're like, there's not really a goal to it. But I think it's just like time on the bike is very valuable. So I think it's critical to play, like just goof around on your bike, you know, like it doesn't matter if there's, you know, you don't need to ride backwards down a small grass hill to like do anything for your mountain biking, but just those little insights you might gain from, you know, doing 1,000 wheelies or whatever. It's like, I think it's very helpful, especially around here where you have, you know, like tight switchbacks and like funky moves where like, you know, like one of the most useful moves around Squamish is like the nose pivot.
Totally.
And like turning your bike.
I seen it in our ride today. You were doing it on every steep corner, and I had to really work to get my nice long bike around the corners, whereas you were kind of jibbing around every one. It looked awesome, and it was probably easier too because you've got that tool.
Yeah, I think so. It's like a bit easier, maybe a bit more efficient, and then it's just like another tool in the toolbox. So
Totally. Yeah, I love that perspective. It's something I've kind of learnt the long way around, and I'm now like, okay, Jake, maybe I do need to spend the 10,000 hours in the parking lot, or maybe
well, I
I
think
should.
you do a lot of coaching, so I think when you're coaching is a good time. You know, like you're not riding as fast. You're spending more time like getting on and off your bike, and then like especially if you coach kids, you know, like kids just want to be goofy and have a good time. You know, you can spend, if you're clever, you can spend 3 hours like in a parking lot or a grassy field with like maybe some cones or just like a little curb drop or something, and like
Totally.
do
Well,
it
that's-
100 ways.
That's a good point. Like kids, and obviously like you spent like those 10,000, probably
Yeah.
a million hours
Yeah.
in the backyard in the parking
Probably
lot.
20.
Working on those skills, right?
Mhm.
And I find quite often as adults we're maybe more limited on time, and we'll be like, right, I've got 3 hours, let's go hit the trails, and we'll be on the trails for 3 hours.
Yeah, exactly.
Perhaps if we
Or if
dedicated
you're coaching, like making sure that you're on your bike too. Like
Totally.
it's important to like, yes, like assess and look and everything, but also like people want to be inspired, and like there's so many learning styles. People need to see other people do it too. So
Definitely. And like I noticed in your riding, you joined me as I was kind of practicing my wheelies on the way back down from the trails today. And watching you wheelie, people will be able to watch that on my Instagram later today. You're in so many different positions over the bike
yeah.
because of those hours. But then I see that on the trail as well when you're manualing in between different features and just able to be such a dynamic rider. So
Totally.
it's inspiring to see.
Thanks.
I wanted to talk, about the coaching. Like, tell us the story. You know, you obviously grew up skiing, you work in the winters as a snow guide. Tell us the story about becoming a mountain bike guide here in Squamish.
So yeah, I was here at Quest University. I'd done a summer at home working construction, and then 2 summers tree planting. And then the next year, like my body was ruined already from tree planting. Like I had, you know, degenerated discs and like scoliosis and lordosis and like, yeah, so like twisting spine, curved spine, issues everywhere, because like it's kind of asymmetrical, and like I was, you know, I was there to make money. You're paid
Right.
per tree. Like,
Yes, you're working as
gotta
hard
work
as you can.
It just wasn't really the right thing for me, I guess. It was really fun. I loved every minute of it, but not every minute, but but so the next summer I was like gonna go tree planting, but my body was already hurting. The season hadn't even started yet, and then I was doing my OFA 3 first aid course, and then someone like, it became apparent that I could get this job working as an ATV guide, And then so I was like, oh sure, I'll do some guiding. That's kind of something I'd like to do anyways. And that was with Whistler ATV Blackcomb snowmobile, and that was really cool because, you know, I wasn't an ATV 4x4 person or anything, but it was like a good foot in the door for guiding. And I was like, you know what, any job guiding is experience guiding.
Sounds like a super fun way to be around.
And it was so fun. Like we had a great time. I worked with an awesome crew, good company, and then, you know, it wasn't quite enough hours or something, so I was like, oh, I'm gonna start working with Ride Hub.
Okay.
I got connected with Ride Hub through like an experiential learning course.
Okay.
At Quest, and then I met Sarah Archer, the owner at the time, and just kind of like built a bit of a relationship, and then started working with them and did my PMBIA levels 1 and 2 that year, maybe 1, 2, and 3 that year.
Fantastic. So right through the 1, 2, and 3 in the first year.
I can't remember if I did. Yeah, I don't remember exactly.
That's impressive,
how it went,
dude, because the riding's one part. You're a hugely experienced rider, but then being able to demo to all levels, but also be able to teach all levels. That's impressive, dude.
I think the ski racing background, like being coached so much at like a high level in that sport, translated pretty easily to like sort of naturally to like a coaching style.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Even though I didn't have any like, that much like training in biking, it was.
And tell us about the coaching side of things. So once you did your qualifications, you got working there for Ride Hub.
Totally.
I know we were chatting a little bit about it on our ride, kind of sharing some common interests and like why we love that job so much.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear you speak on that.
I mean, it's just so cool to like get to like share the like learning of biking with someone in a way that is like safe, that they feel comfortable with, and that like, you know, within maybe say a 3 or 6 hour session, like you can like walk away with, you know, tangible improvements for the rest of your life or whatever. And I don't know, it's just really rewarding to like see people progress and to share that.
It's pretty powerful, isn't it?
Yeah, it's awesome. Like you're at work, but like it's so rewarding and it just, feels really cool. And you build like good relationships and
Totally. So you're there kind of working with Ride Hub for a few seasons, like group lessons, private lessons, all kinds of different riders.
Yeah, exactly. I was like taking on a lot of the kids coaching side of things and running the kids programs. And so we would like work with the Ninja Gym and do half days. So
awesome.
Half the kids would come with us in the morning, and then we'd go swap the group. And then, so we'd be biking all day, like huge days on the bike. And with a ton of kids, and we'd just do like a few weeks of that, and that was really fun. And then found a group of kids that was a bit more serious about it, worked with them for another couple seasons, and they were called the Feature Creatures.
Okay,
Super
right.
rad
So
group.
like a progression group that you stayed with for more of a long-term coaching program.
Totally. Like it's so good to see the next generation there.
It is. And speaking of that, like we've just been out for a ride, and I think every second person we rode past, you're like, oh, hey buddy, hey.
Totally.
All these different people you've connected with over the years. So yeah, went from working there with Ride Hub, obviously learned heaps, lots of different programs. Tell us the story about like connecting with Yoann and starting to work with him.
Yoann and I had it was really funny. Like I was out riding Reaper one day.
Yeah.
And I came around the corner as you like roll along the bench into that sort of the classic technical right hand rock corner on Reaper.
Yeah.
And Yoann's like there in the middle of the trail with his camera doing his thing, you know, like, hello, it's me, I'm here on Reaper. And and I was like, oh, sweet. He's making a video. I'm just going to I'll leave him his space and I'll just take that little cut down line next to the tree there, down the cliff, the French line. And I rode down it, and Yoann was like, oh my gosh, can you do that again? I was like, yeah, sure. And then I introduced myself, and then I went and rode it, and then I did some other moves through to help, just for his video, because he was basically there waiting, I think, for people to ride by and do the corner. So
you randomly met and then became part of his video that day.
I don't even know if he ever made a video out of it, but maybe he did.
That's so funny.
I should go check, but... But then the next day or 2 days later, I was in, was doing my PMBI level 1, and I was in Whistler lot 5 at 7 in the morning. And I get out of my car and I'm messing around, and Yoann rides right by, and I'm like, hey, what are you doing here? He's like, what are you doing here? was like, I'm doing my PMBI coaching thing. He's like, oh, me too. And then we were in the same group. Right. And so we did like our level 1 bike instructor course together.
That must have been a wild level 1 course.
It was wild, yeah. And like Javier Munoz Santos was the instructor of the course, and Javi's also super rowdy. And then this guy Seb was in the course, and Michael Sawa, who's like the Cro-Mag athlete, representative manager guy. I don't know the exact job title, but he deals with the athletes at Cro-Mag, and Mike's awesome. And so it was this super like funny random collection. But yeah, and then we like we're doing something very like, I don't know, similar close by again like a few days after, and it was like, oh, we should go biking sometime. And then a couple of years later we were working together.
Yeah, what a crazy coincidence of events.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. And like after that we just kind of like sort of stayed in touch and rode bikes every now and again. But then he needed some help with one of his, he's trying to run like a bigger group program and wanted to involve someone else, so we connected, and I've been working together since. It's been super sick.
Man, that's so rad. So what's it been, like a couple of seasons now, or one full season?
A little more than like all year this year, and sort of the end of the season last year. So
yeah, that's fantastic.
I think we started in like August or September last year.
That's awesome. So I think it's almost like every second day when I'm out on the trails coaching, I'll see either you or Yoann out there as well. Yeah, totally. Always smiling, always having good times. It's so rad to see. And I guess kind of working with the higher end of riders, lots of free ride stuff, lots of kind of gnarly lines.
Totally. Like that's always sort of where I've wanted to go with my biking, especially like coaching, is to help people. You know, there's definitely a process for like riding a more gnarly line, and doing so with, you know, doing so as safely as you can, I guess.
Yeah.
And I just find that really interesting, and I don't feel like, I don't know, I feel like I'm sort of in a good place to like help people with that. Like,
definitely.
I've spent a lot of time doing that stuff, but I in no way like feel like I pressure people to like ride anything that they're not comfortable with. Like I'm always like talking people out of riding gnarly things. Like,
okay.
No, you don't have to do it today. Like, no, don't worry. You can go ride a bunch of these other things and come back to it. But I think I like that. I don't know. It's nice feeling like you can help people, and I've received a lot of really positive feedback. And you know, like we had a pretty bad accident where someone they like got seriously injured and needed a helicopter evac. And that one's really tough, right? Because you're like, shoot, are we doing something wrong? Are we pushing this too much? But the sport is just going in that direction. And like someone else from our group, you know, reached out and said like, hey, we just want to say thank you for being there, because, you know, if you think about it, like all of us would still be there doing that same stuff anyways, just on like the advice of a YouTube, you know, video, rather than like actually being there, being coached, and like
totally
being helped. So as much as it's like, you know, by pushing the sport and like focusing on like higher end riders, higher end terrain, you know, those people are going to be doing that anyways. And so we're still, you know, in that respect, making things safer, which feels good.
Totally, yeah.
It feels very worth
it. Very nice to be there with a qualified coach and someone that's first aid trained.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
100%. And like those people want to be riding this stuff anyways. There's so many videos of like everyone doing gnarly stuff. It's nice to sort of have those videos and then be able to follow up with like an in-person, like, okay, this is actually what it's like. It's not just like la crazy shit in the woods. Like
totally, yeah. It's good to get that first person perspective of like, yeah, like this is the process we go through. We don't always say yes.
Totally.
That kind of thing. And like looking back, obviously you figured out all of this stuff
somehow
by yourself with your buddies.
I think the ski race training helped a lot. Yeah,
I'm sure that was some cool insight. Do you wish you had some like mountain bike free ride training?
So much.
Like looking back on your experience figuring it out?
I mean, I did have like these little bike camps I went to when I was a kid, and like I had some really good inspiration. Like there was a little bit of a mountain bike scene in New Hampshire, but just like not really where I was. There's like Highland Mountain Bike Park, that's like an hour and a bit away.
Yeah.
A couple other sort of like places, but I went to this camp every year called Coyote Hill, mountain bike camp run by this guy, Tom Masterson, who's super rad. and we'd like build jumps and build drops and like do a bit of the like free ride stuff. We'd like watch the New World Disorder movies, you know, like it was super cool. But it was like 1 week of my year,
right? Okay.
And it was like there wasn't really enough knowledge, and like bikes were too varied at the time. You know, like some kids are there on like hardtail clunker bikes.
Yeah.
Some kids are there with like the newest, you know, Cove, whatever, dual suspension, like downhill bike.
Totally.
So like, not only do we not have a bike park or like shuttle trails, it's all like these cross country trails with tons of variety in bikes and kids, ages and everything. So like the camps were really good. They just didn't have like a good solid client base that was like cohesive.
Totally. It must have been so tricky.
It must have been so tricky to
Yeah.
run looking back, but like they did an amazing job, and it was super cool to like to have that, because it exposed me to a lot of like, you know, I was a little kid, but like I would be like 8 years old there, and there'd be like this 15-year-old kid on a sweet downhill bike building this like 15-foot drop in the woods, you know, with like all Tom's tools.
Yeah.
And then he finished it, and then we were like, okay, well, he's the only guy who's gonna hit it, but everyone like got to go walk up it and check it out. And like I remember I ended up hitting that like 2 years later or something.
Wow.
So like there still was that progression. It just wasn't super linear, and it wasn't always like easy to do. But yeah,
isn't that cool? Like getting
so
that
cool.
perspective of like, this is how you build a feature. This is how it happens. And then 2 years later, perhaps having enough exposure, enough experience to be like, I feel comfortable hitting this thing now.
Just like wanting it too. You know, if you don't know about it, you don't want it. But like seeing it, getting to like look off the top, being like, I want to.
Yeah, it's often a great way
jump.
to like come up with goals, isn't it? Just like seeing something.
Exactly.
And I'd love to talk about this. We chatted at the start of our ride, you know, about your riding and about how you perhaps go about setting some different goals.
Right.
Can you tell us about, like your process there, and then perhaps about how you work with students to help them set goals as well?
Totally. I mean, I think as far as goal setting goes, you can have a few, you sort of need like you need to know if you've accomplished your goal or not. So it's like racing is nice, where you're like, I want to do X number of races this year, and I want to place, you know, this well by the end. And to do that, I'm going to train this much and ride like, you know, that's sort of like the traditional way I think that people have done it. But free riding is a little harder, because, you know, you might want to hit a feature, or you might want to like make a video or something that's a little like, it's hard to know if you've done it well, or like to the, like enough to be successful.
Yeah.
But I think that's kind of the beauty of it, is like it's not structured. It's like you're going more for like a lifestyle approach to mountain biking, which is, if you do it well, you can sell it. But if you're like most people, like me, you know, it's you're just like, oh, I just spend all my time doing this.
Yeah.
And like pursuing it still, but you know, I always thought like to be a free rider or whatever, you just had to like be good enough. Like you just had to hit a bunch of big enough features and stuff. But really it's a lot more than that. Like there's, you know, that was it when it was like the original crew of free riders who were like kind of outcasty from all over the place. You know, you had like, you know, Matt Hunter and like Josh Bender and all these people who just like, they just hit huge stuff. And you're like, whoa, that was crazy. And they'd always had the video part. You're like, oh, I guess if I just get good enough, then I'll have a video part. But there's a ton of people thinking that. So then it's not just about being good enough. You know, like the next generation is like so good in so many different ways. Now you have to like have a profile, like a social media account, and like be very multifaceted in order to be a professional. Like now you're really just selling stuff. You're like a marketer or an influencer or something, as opposed to like being the sort of face of a movement.
Yeah, the industry's changed a lot, and it's continuing to change really quickly, isn't it?
It sure is, and it's hard to sort of know what you can do now to positively, like, have a positive impact on your future. But I think like you go ride your bike every day and get better.
That's a great start, isn't it?
You know, like if you're too like result oriented, you know, your goals, they don't really necessarily take you in the right way. Like,
I love that you touched on that, and going back to even just like setting riding goals.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something I've learned the hard way as well. If we're too outcome focused,
you got to be process oriented.
We're not focusing in the moment and doing the work that will point us towards that outcome.
Totally. Yeah. It's just like your goal should be to love riding your bike, right? Like if you have fun every time you ride your bike, then you're going to ride your bike a lot. And then that's going to like feed into being good at biking, I think.
Totally. And this is actually something I wanted to ask you. Like, I see you as like this unique guy in the industry that's like really high level rider. You've got your own crazy style, doing all sorts of different projects. Like, where do you see yourself taking biking, like in the next 5 years or the next 10 years? Like, where do you see yourself going within the industry?
I've been actually really like struggling a bit with like the vision for the future, because I sort of like always had this like, okay, I just gotta like ride my bike every day and I gotta hit all the features that I've seen in Squamish, and like I have to like play a bit of catch up. And I feel like I've kind of done that. Like I've hit all the features that I've thought about, more or less. There's a few little new ones popping up here and there, but like, you know, I've hit all the Garanga features, all the like drop and roll, all the big scary things, and then you're like, well, now like what do I want? It's like, I don't know. I just wanted to be here, and now you're here. It's like, well, you know, I think what I want to do is like have mountain biking be my job. And so I think to do that, like, you know, for some like smaller goals, it's like bring more like 360s and backflips and like, you know, little things I can work on at like the Nestor's jump or at the Red jump or whatever, and like just hone those in and bring them into like, you know, bike park riding, or build some more cool features. But yeah, I think there's certain things that I want to do, but it's hard to know.
I love where you're going with that. It's an like weird, interesting place to find yourself in, isn't it? Like when you like achieve everything you ever dreamed of, and then you're like, what's next?
Yeah. I want to make more videos. I really enjoy like making little video parts that are like kind of fun, and like, you know, working with some local businesses to like.
Yeah, that's something we haven't touched on yet. Tell us about your latest edit. It's like honestly one of the favorite things I watched on Instagram this year, just because it was creative and it was fun, it was different. Yeah. Tell us about that. You worked with the guy, Alistair.
Yeah, my friend Alistair Spriggs. Yeah. He was super rad. He volunteered a bunch of his time and skills, and let me jump in and out of his truck a bunch of different times. Like,
so you literally jump in and out on the mountain bike. Again, if people haven't watched this one, I'll put a link in the show notes. It's what is it, a minute and a half long? It's definitely worth your time.
Yeah, a little over a minute.
But like, what was your vision in creating that? You're like, hey, cool, we're gonna make an edit.
Pretty much that's it. Just like, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like, all right, let's make a little, like, you know, he does a lot of like snowboarding, filming, and a lot of photography, but I think he was looking to sort of expand his filming portfolio a little bit, like get some more experience. You know, I don't know with exactly what, maybe it's lighting, maybe it's just like style of filming or whatever. You know, we'd sort of come up with a little jump or something to ride, and then figure out different angles, and just a lot of like hitting it, hiking up, hitting it, hiking up. Oh, let's do it like this, hit it, do it again. So for both of us, it was like pretty experimental as far as just like, you know, what it actually takes to create a little edit like that. And then it was just kind of naturally came out to be like kind of goofy and styled towards how I like to ride my bike.
Totally.
I think
really cool to see, like, lots of wheelies, lots of parking lot stuff within the trail and the free riding style there as well.
I feel like it actually gave me, like, after watching it, I was like, oh, I have some more ideas about what I could do next. Like, it'd be funny to do like a video literally all on one wheel. Like Danny Mac did the wheelie video.
Yeah.
But I think it'd be cool to like do more of a shred it, but change up how you're on one wheel in as many different ways as you could.
Using
so like
the front
jump
wheel
from
as
back to front to back, like just like adding other variations, like cool stuff.
Man, I can't wait to see that one.
Yeah, maybe that'll happen.
It's really cool, isn't it? I love having this chat about like that experience of like feeling a bit like, oh, where do I go next?
Mm-hmm.
But then making some moves forward and like, oh, I'll try doing some filming, and then you're like, oh, now let's open up some more doors, and maybe that's the direction you'll go down.
Totally.
Like to achieve that outcome of making mountain biking your job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like something that's possible, so I'd like to do it, whatever it takes.
Definitely, dude. I think you found your path. You just got to keep treading down that path.
Just keep blindly stumbling. Yeah.
You got it, man. It's like mountain biking. Sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes it's awesome.
Yeah.
Keep moving forward.
Keep it going.
Yeah, totally.
It's good.
Man, this has been a fantastic conversation. I feel like we've covered so much.
Yeah.
As we wind stuff down here, a couple of questions I like to ask. Who do you look up to in the mountain biking world, and why?
Wow, like a lot of people. I mean, I'm always like, maybe looking up is kind of a funny way to put it for me in this, but like I'm always watching the next generation.
Yep.
Seeing like I don't know, just what the kids are doing, like how they're riding, because you know, like they're the ones who are really focused on like what to do in mountain biking. You know, they're the ones who are like seeing all these different riders really well. So like if you look at the kids, you can like pretty clearly know where mountain biking is going. So you're like, okay,
Totally.
I got to work on this to stay relevant.
It is amazing talking to the kids around here, isn't it? Because they're spending like probably 100 hours a week on YouTube.
Yeah.
And they know everything about you. They know everything about Yoann, about Remy. They're watching all the videos. And I guess they've just got this giant bag of ideas and like what's possible and what they want to do in the future.
Mm-hmm. And then like, yeah, watching some, like, you know, Semenuk is one of mine and many other people's favorite riders to watch, like style, tricks, just like creativity. It's amazing. And does a good job of translating it via video.
Yep.
And then I think like, I don't know, obviously like, you know, Yoann and Remy and Steve and like the whole sort of crew around here of people who I've like really looked up to for a while and like worked pretty hard to sort of like be a part of that community or that crew. And then Danny McCaskill is another one of my favorites. Like that guy is just, you know, he's got incredible talent and like his vision for biking is like, I really like how creative and unique he is. That's like not exactly the way he does it, but his style inspires me to like be individualistic, I think.
Totally.
So, yeah, I like.
Yeah, man.
I just like watching anyone ride their bike, you know, like BMX. I love watching BMX too, like Brad Sims, Dennis Anderson, Prangenberg, Felix.
Okay.
Prangenberg, I think. Yeah, just like really creative and just like BMX is pretty core, you know, like you fall hard on concrete repeatedly. Like I'm always inspired by like how tough those guys are and how they get up, and like just seeing their drive like motivates me to be more driven as well and like, you know, push past the like first bit of failure.
Yeah, it's so cool to hear, like drawing on inspiration from all these different facets of biking and then using that to fuel your fire.
For sure.
I love it, man. As we wrap up here, I want to give you the opportunity. Is there any like sponsors or industry partners you wanted to mention on the podcast while we're here?
I mean, yeah, there's some folks who've really helped me out, like NF Clothing. They've always been awesome, and Coast Optics. These guys are killing it.
Nice one.
Check out their new glasses and their relatively new goggles as well. Like those guys, they're based in Whistler and they're doing some really cool stuff. So thanks to y'all. And then I think, you know, of course my parents, they always they're everyone's number one sponsor.
Thank you,
really.
Mom and Dad.
So,
I love it.
Gotta give them the shout out. And yeah, I mean, there's so many people around who help support the community, and Tantalus Bike Shop, they do a lot for me. They just help me get my bike sorted in like 45 minutes before I ride. So
awesome.
Legends, yeah.
Rad people, Thank you to Tantalus for that.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure I'm missing someone, but thank you, whoever you are.
Fantastic, dude. Look, let's talk about all sorts of things here. If there's just one thing you could give our listeners to go away and think about perhaps on the next pedal up, what would it be?
Oh, ride with your imagination.
I love that.
Yeah, keep it fun and always have fun.
Fantastic, dude.
That's it.
Well, thanks so much for hanging out this afternoon. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Jake. Yeah, it's been awesome, man. I appreciate you having me on, and thanks for your time.
What's up, guys? Just one more thing before you hit the trails. If you enjoyed this podcast, please be sure to subscribe and don't be a stranger. I'd love to hear from you about any topics or any particular episodes that you enjoyed, and even about any guests that you'd like to hear me have on the show in the future. You can find me on Instagram at _mind_mountain. This podcast, mountain biking, and mindset are all things that are very close to my heart, so I feel super grateful to be able to share these conversations with you. So much love to you all for taking the time to listen. I'll see you next time.